check on the main sound here. Let's try this out. Yeah, let me know if you hear that. Check this out over here. Main sound here. Let's try this out. All right. Looks like that might be it. Hey, everybody. Thought I would just kind of throw out there another live stream today because hadn't had the chance to put together another whole video and was messing around with some new stuff that I figured might be interesting to some of you. So yeah, and if you got a question or a comment or anything like that, jump in the chat. I will do my best to try and keep an eye on that as well. There is a little bit of a delay, just so you know, so I may get it instantly, but go ahead and put something in there as soon as you get it. And yeah, so I'm gonna try this. Just let me know if you guys can hear this. Do a little, this is what I was messing around with. Are you getting sound from there, that bass line? Cool. Doubling in the voice. Oh, you know what? I was listening through my where I have the chat coming in from YouTube, so it may have been that. You may have heard coming into the mic, but does it sound okay like this? Let me know. If not, I can turn it down a little, see if it's not feeding back there a little. That might help. All right. Cool. Right. So yeah, what I was working on here, let me show you a different view. So this is the setup that I'm working on right now. Trying out some different stuff. I love to kind of mix things around and, see how other stuff works together. So I have the Octatrack with the EasyBot performance template in it. And so all my gear is kind of running through that. Analog Rhythm's doing drums. And with the Syntakt right now, I have it doing synth voices. And I'm sequencing those from the OXI One and also internally from the Syntakt. So kind of both of those things together. They each do their own thing better, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm doing that. Then they run through the Octatrack so that I can use the performance template. Now, I just recently, finally, Matthew will tell you finally, just recently. Just recently updated to the most recent version of the performance template. So I'm just kind of getting to know it now. So I haven't put my tape down so I know which one each is yet, because I'm not quite sure which of the parts I'm going to use yet. But for the time being, I'm using if you have this template, I'm using part one, which is called the space part, which is pretty cool. There's a bunch of kind of DJ sounding effects that I'm really used to in there, which is, so what I'm doing with that. So, so besides that, you notice I don't have my modular here like I normally do. One of the things that I've been working on is different ways to do the melodic voices. Now, I love the modular and I will always still use the modular, but I wanted to try and get some different options there. And one of the things I love about using the OXI One is that it is just a sequencer. So it's sequencing whatever you plug it into. So what's cool about this is that I can come up with sequences, something that I like. I can write something by sequencing the Syntakt and sequencing the voices in here. And then if I want to use my modular with it, all I have to do is just change the destinations and those same things will go into the modular. I also have been using the OXI One when I travel for work with my day job. So I will take this with, and then I'll use like an iPad or my iPhone, and I'll use AUM and just like kind of random synth plugins, and I can sequence things on here. So I can sketch out ideas, and then as soon as I get back, I just plug it in like this, and I can go ahead and use it in my in my full setup. So yeah, so what I was coming up with, I have the OXI One set up right now, so that sequencer 3 is a multi-sequencer, which means that all 8 of these rows, each one is a different sequencer. So if you think about it kind of like here on the analog rhythm, you've got 16 steps. Each one of these rows is 16 steps. So each one is a sequencer like what's here, or like what's here in the Octatrack, or like that if you put it next to each other. So that way I can really quickly jot down ideas. I have these rooted so that via MIDI, it's going into the Syntakt. I have them going from bottom to top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are going to tracks 1 through 8. And then I have tracks 1, 2, and 4 on 9, 10, and 11 here. Sorry, sequencers 1, 2, and 4 set up as mono sequencers, and they're going to tracks 9, 10, 11. So I can sequence 11 different synth voices in the Syntakt using the OXI One, which is pretty cool. And then when it comes time, if I want to go into my modular setup, I can send these 8 voices to the OXI Choral, and that'll do all 8 of those voices separated out. And then I can send the other voices to the 3 other mono voices that are in my case. So it's really handy to do it this way because, again, I can take just the sequencer and my phone with me, and I can work on stuff, come back, plug it in, it's ready to connect to this. If I want to use the modular, quick connect, and it's good for the modular. So it's super handy. It's one of the things that I love about it is that it really is so flexible. So just to give you an idea what I was messing around with, and then what I'm going to do is I'll show you what I was working on, and then I'll just blank it out and start from scratch so you can kind of see how quickly and easily it is to quick and easy it is to build a track on this. So yeah, so it just started off with a bass voice. This the OXI is also clocking everything, so you notice when I push play here, everything else comes on. These are all muted, and this is no effect at all right now. This is just kind of going through to an open thing. Then if I want to bring in some drum voices, so just real quick, I'll show you. So this is 2 different voices on the analog rhythm. So one is just a straight kick, and then the other one is the rumble. And then those 2 together. I like to do it that way so that I can have control over both independently instead of just affecting the kick and having that be the rumble. This way it allows me to use, to modify one or the other, change the tuning, do things like that separately. So yeah. As you can see on this, you can also mute individual tracks of these 8 that we have here. So I've got a few things on the other tracks, but they're all muted except for this one right here with this bass voice. This bass voice is here on track 5. So now within the Syntakt, I've got track 5. Now I can go in and change things up. And again, this is being sequenced from the OXI, but all of the synth voice parts of this are in here. So it allows me to have a lot of control over everything at the same time. And then I can bring in a new voice here. And again, that's another voice here in the OXI, or in the Syntakt. Show you a few of the other voices that I was working on here in the Syntakt, but sequenced from the OXI. Now, if I was to mute all these out, everything you're hearing here is coming from the analog rhythm, going into the Octatrack and through the performance mixer. Cool thing with the way that this is set up as well is that the performance mixer works on everything. So you hear I can filter things out, add delays and stuff, and that's taking care of everything. But you also have performance scenes in here. So if I want to do something different here, and so that can all be done just inside the rhythm. And then you can actually combine those things, which is pretty cool. So start to filter things out this way, and then so you have the ability to combine effects from both of them into the same thing. And then with this, the way I have this set up is so that you can bring in and out individual parts and have them kind of mix and matched with your performing stuff. So I have on my second sequencer here, it's sequencing another voice, so we'll unmute that one here. So yeah, just to give you a little idea of what I was working on. Actually, I'm gonna turn this back up just a little. Yeah, let's check out in the chat. Oh, cool. Thank you guys for hopping on. Good to see you guys. Let's see here. Does this template use 8 as the master or flex? I think, yeah, it's a flex track. If I'm not wrong, I was talking to Matthew about this the other day, and he set this up so that it's 2 buses basically. So you've got your drum bus that's coming in on this side. So you've got a through track, a neighbor, and then a flex. And then on this side, you've got your melodic stuff coming in. So you've got a through track, a neighbor, and a flex. So it's basically 2 different channels, 2 different buses of the same thing. And it allows, there's some of the effects in here that will affect just the drum side or affect just the melodic side. So yeah. Let's see here. Do you do all the transitions on the Octatrack? Is it possible to do transitions on the rhythm or the Syntakt? I guess it kind of depends what you mean by transitions. So when I play live, I don't pre-prepare tracks. I don't have things, kind of set up. Actually, let me change the view here. So I don't actually have things set up as, okay, track 1, track 2, track 3, and then I have to transition from one to the other. I basically have everything set up so that it can all be kind of mixed and matched and improvised. So I'll transition individual voices at a time or individual pieces of music at a time, but I won't, I don't generally transition from track to track. So not really, but I guess there is a yes answer to that as far as do I use the Octatrack, because one of the things that I love to do with the Octatrack is, I'll just show you. So if, so if I'm just playing along with this, okay, so if I've got something like this and I want to bring in a new part, so for me, that's a transition because I'm transitioning in a part. So what I might end up doing is, let's see, like I'll take this to a high pass filter and I'll high pass it and then use that as a way to bring in, let's say, a hat. So you get like kind of a little mini break or, a way to do a transition. You could actually do it also with things like, delays and filters and stuff like that. Just as a way to kind of smooth bringing those in so you're not just like muting and unmuting. It's a way to use the instruments and use the effects to bring something in. So it makes it more like a track that you would produce. So if you were producing a track, you would generally not just bring something in. You might filter it in, you might, have it build up, you might bring it in, using the volume and bring it in from lower to higher. You may bring in an effect, you may start it filtered, like high passed, and then take that off or things like that. So yes, I use these for transitioning, and the same, with the rhythm, you can do that as well. But also I'll do things in the Syntakt. So for example, like that voice that we were just listening to, let's say I bring that filter all the way down, and this is how I start it in. You don't really hear it, but it's still playing. So you can hear it start to filter in. So again, same thing. You can, that's one of the reasons why I really like using these particular machines, is that you have a lot of immediate control over everything that you're using. I do the same thing often with kicks as well. So if I was going to bring in a new kick, I might low pass a kick, high pass a kick, and bring it in like So that click is the kick, but it's just high passed. You know, if I wanted to start it off like that, and then I can bring it in, and if I want, I can do one of the effects here. So you can see that you've got a whole bunch of different ways that you can bring pieces and parts in and out all the time. So let's see. What is the model of your headphones? Actually, these are the III Studio. They're wireless, which is one of my favorite things about them because I have my studio set up. If you take a look at some of the different views here. So where I'm sitting is at this desk where I tend to do like overhead video shots and where I set up my live stream. But then I also have a rack over on that side, and then flip it around and I have a rack over on that side with some other synths on the side and guitars over there and things like that. So what I like to do is I like to have the wireless headphones, so that way if it's late at night, the family's asleep and no one wants to listen to what I'm doing, I can just keep these on and move around as if I didn't have any headphones on at all. So they're super handy. The sound is great. There's no latency with this particular group because they have a transmitter. So they can be Bluetooth, but with Bluetooth there's latency, so it's not a lot of fun when you're doing production. But if you use their transmitter instead of using them in Bluetooth mode, you get zero latency or really, really super low latency, not enough that you would ever notice it. Unless, I mean, depends. You may, if you were, a vocalist and you were trying to hear things like that, you may hear slight delay. But as far as the stuff that I do, you don't hear that at all. So let's see what else here. Bones. Answered the question. Good. I guess I did answer the question. Is the OXI One controlling modular stuff. So right now, I don't have any modular in this setup at all. It is only what you see right here. There's nothing else. There's nothing else connected to it. So the OXI One is actually sequencing 12 voices or 11 voices in the Syntakt. There's one that I didn't have a channel for. But if I wanted to bring in my modular, I could just disconnect the Syntakt, put in the modular, and then have the OXI One send the exact same patterns to different voices in the modular. I just have to set it up to where I want those to send to. So it's one of my favorite things about this device is that it can do that. It's really super flexible that way. Let's see. Crossfader, the Octatrack is basically a macro. Yes. The thing with the Octatrack with the crossfader is it can be assigned to anything. So you can assign A or B to whatever you want to, and then you can fade between them. So with this template, it's set up so that each one of these assignable scenes is an effect. So it's a macro. It's a combination of, a delay and a reverb and a lo-fi effect and a filter and whatever, all combined into one effect that you can then assign in crossfade, just like you would with a macro in Ableton or in your regular DAW. It can actually be set up to do a lot more than that, though, because it's not just set up to do macros with effects. That's kind of mostly how I'm using it. But you can actually set this up as well to, for example, you can record a 4-bar loop of what's playing out your main, and then you can assign that loop to B and then fade across to the pattern. So, like here. Not sure how to do that on this yet because it's a new template. On the old one, if you held down the track 7 and pushed yes, it would record to a recording buffer, and then that would be on scene 16. So if you assign 16 to B, you would fade across to a recording. So you could then do transitions. You could basically stop everything if you wanted to. That's weird. Oh no, it did record it. What am I talking about? Yeah, so this is a recording of that part of that track. So you could fade across to a recording of what's on your main. You could change parts and then you could crossfade between them if you wanted to. So it's a bit more than a macro. In that case, you're setting it up like a looper and a way to crossfade between live looping and what's live. Let's see. Easier to understand with examples. I'm glad. That's why I'm trying to do it this way, because I get asked a ton of questions and then I try to answer back, and sometimes I catch myself like, man, I'm just like super long-winded getting through this whole answer. I should just show you, and it's a lot easier. So if you have questions, if there's something that you'd like me to show you how I do or something like that, if I know how to do it, I'm happy to show you how to do it. There's plenty of stuff I have no idea how to do, so I will let you know if I don't know how to do it. But if I do, happy to show you and happy to give you some examples of that. But yeah, let's see here. So you do the two transitions, Octatrack and per machine in tandem. You can. And that's what's cool about this. Like when I built this setup, I really intentionally built it to be as flexible as possible. So you can do transitions between parts any way you want. Another example, just using the analog rhythm here. So the analog rhythm is set up in kits. That's the way it works. So I have a kit that's these drum sounds right now. Just gonna say that one, make sure I don't mess anything up. So if you go to kit, you can load a new kit. It will keep the same pattern that you have, but it will load a new kit. So let's say you wanted to just transition with your hat because you've got something else playing over here. So you've got this going, for example. Let's see here. So, and you want to keep your melodic stuff going and you've got your hat going, but you want to load a new kit. So you want to transition to a different song, if you will. So, I can't remember what this kit is. It's kind of an old one, but let's try it. So you notice the hat changed, but it didn't do anything else because all it did was keep that same pattern with just a new sound. So now if I bring in the kick on this one, and I've got different sounds in this kit, but that are all going to do that same pattern that I was working off of before. So this is with this kit here, and then if I wanted to go back to the kit that I was using before, but with the same pattern, but just with different sounds on it. So you see a transition from kit to kit. So again, another way to do transitions. So you can do it using machines, you can do it using effects, you can do it using parameters of the synth, for example, like I showed before, like using the filter to filter out a particular synth voice. You can change kits on the drum machine. There's all different ways that you can transition. And the idea being that because I'm not pre-preparing tracks when I play live, but I'm just playing live, I need a lot of options because I'll be in the middle of a show and I'll be like, oh, I want to do this. I have this idea that came to me because of what's going on right now in the room. And so I want to do something different. I think, oh, I need I'm playing a kick drum that sounds like this, but I want to play with a kick drum that is filtered. So I can soften the kick drum like that here. I'm gonna take these out so you can hear it. So that right there is exactly the same kick drum that I was playing before. I didn't change kits or anything. All I did was go from a high pass filter with a resonant boost to a low pass filter. So if I go back to the high pass filter with that resonant boost, That's the same kick, the same pattern, the same everything. I just changed the filter. So it just makes it really, really super flexible to be able to do that kind of stuff individually by machine, and then with everything running through the Octatrack as well. All right, so let's see. If you're using the Syntakt for voices, why not use an Analog 4? How does the Syntakt compare? Can do a lot of what the Analog 4 can as far as sounds. Yes, so again, set up for efficiency and flexibility. I set this up as well to try and be as small as it could be for traveling. And the Analog 4 is the same size as the Analog Rytm. So if you notice, this is way bigger than the Syntakt. And the Analog 4 has 4 voices. The Syntakt has 12 voices. So you get 3 times the number of voices in a package that's much smaller. So for me, that equals 3 times the flexibility, 3 times the ability to do a bunch of different things. Now, the Analog 4 can be 4-note polyphonic by stealing voices from the other notes or from the other tracks, which the Syntakt can't do. But for the type of music that I do, I don't do a ton of polyphonic sounds. I don't have a lot of like big pads and things like that. And so if I want something like that, there's a chord engine in here that I can use. I've got, when I do play with my modular and use that for the melodic voices, I have the OXI Choral, and that has the ability to do 8-note polyphony, and it's also 8-voice multi-timbral, so gives again a ton of flexibility. One of the reasons though why I'm trying out this setup here is again for size. Being able to get 12 voices in something this size is pretty awesome, because my modular case is about this big. It's about almost as big as this whole setup right here. And that has 4 voices in it. Although one has 8 voices, so it's like, I guess you could say that there's 11. But anyway, yeah, so that's why I'm using this instead of the Analog 4. I did have the Analog 4 for a while. I actually ended up selling it pretty recently because I just found I wasn't using it. I've got a lot of other analog synths. Syntakt has analog voices in it. The Analog Rytm has dual VCO voices in it. Then I've got here in the studio, I've got a lot of really good sounding analog synths, and so I can always just either sample things or things like that. So I just found I wasn't using it. But anyway, that's why I use it. Size and the amount of flexibility within the in the same box. All right, let's see here. Interesting that the OXI sequencer is a big enough benefit over the Syntakt's built-in one to make that effective, or it does look very hands-on. Yeah, so that's that great segue. Thank you, RJ. Great segue into what I wanted to do next is I wanted to show you a little bit. I wanted to show you some, sorry, here. Basically how I set stuff up. So I'm just going to switch to open parts here. So if we go back, so again, you look on the sequencers, they're empty now. There's nothing in them. So all blank. So I've got 8 tracks on sequencer 3, and then 1, 2, and 4 are all mono. What's really cool with this is I can build patterns however I want, and then I can take them wherever I want. So that's one of the biggest advantages. So right now I've got it connected to the Syntakt. I can build a bunch of patterns, but if I want to go do a show with my modular and I like some of those patterns and I did want to use them as part of the show, I can just connect the OXI to my modular and use those same patterns in that kind of a context. So that's really handy. The other big thing, which for me is really important, and it's one thing that the Syntakt does not do, and main reason why I'm doing it this way, is the OXI One is you can quantize it to key and key and root note and everything, so you can have everything quantized together. for notes, note quantization. So the Syntakt doesn't do that. You can quantize the keyboard and you can play notes in with the keyboard fold. You can play notes in that are quantized to a scale. But with the OXI, you can sequence quantize to a scale. So for example, if we go to 2 here, I can change the scale. So right now, I don't know if you can see that. Pretty small, but it's set to chromatic and C2 because that's just kind of like the way that it automatically goes. But I can do major, minor, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, mixed Lydian, Locrian, pentatonic, major, minor, melodic blues, Arabian, Balinese, Oriental, Polynesian, Persian, all different types of scales. So I'm a big fan of Phrygian scale. So let's do like Phrygian E for that. And I'm actually going to do the same for all of the tracks, just so that way everything will be in the same scale. So Phrygian scale, root note of E2, which can be changed, those scales and root note can be changed live while you play as well, which is really cool. These are going to I need to set these up. So you just go ahead and quickly set each one of these channels to their own MIDI channel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 6, 5, 4, 3. All right, so now they're set up just that fast, setting up to 1 through 8. So that means they're going to 1 through 8 in the Syntakt now. So now, if we go ahead and hit play here, I can make a sequence, for example, on track 1. Here, I'll mute the rest of these. I can make a sequence on track 1. It's going to go to voice 1 in the Syntakt, so whatever I put in here. So that's sequencing this voice right here. If I go in and hold a note, and then I change the note here, it will change the note all within the Phrygian E scale. So that means that I can just spin this to whatever I want. And anything I go to, change the whole scale. Okay, so now we're Phrygian E. So now if I just hit one of these and change the note, and change the note of this. That's all staying within that key. So that's an example within this voice, but let's go back over to this one. And so with this one, this is all set up as a mono sequencer. And what that means is that you got 16 steps, and then you've got the 8 notes in that scale, that Phrygian root note of E2 scale. So the bottom row is E2 on each step, and then there's a note up from that. So if you just enter in some random notes, everything I just entered in randomly is all in that Phrygian scale with the root of E2. So everything's in the Phrygian root E2 there. So, and anything that I change and move around and do something different with or whatever, it's all going to stay within that scale. So what's really handy about that, again, while I perform live, my sets are all improvised. So I love the ability to improvise something on the fly while I'm playing, but have enough control over it to know that it's going to be in key with other stuff that's playing. So if I keep everything in the same key, I can do all of that randomization with this, which I can't do within the Syntakt. On its own. You can't randomize, but within a quantized key yet. Hopefully they do that. I mean, they've shown they can do it because the keyboard fold does it. So it would be nice if it did it. The Octatrack does that. If you're sequencing from there, if you go into the arpeggiator mode, you can set a key and use that to sequence other things. But because I'm not sequencing from that, it makes it a bit more complicated. So this way I can do this. The other thing that's cool, just clear that out. There's a randomization function in here, which is great. So if you go to this, looks like a little roll the dice button here, you can adjust the range, the randomization, the density of notes. So how many notes per 16 steps. So if we bring the range down to 10%, and so the randomization to 10%, let's bring the density up to like 75 or so. And then you push down on this encoder, it's going to generate a random pattern that's in Phrygian root E. So now if we play this, and if I don't like that one, I can just hit the encoder again. And if I want the notes more dense, and more randomized. And again, these are all in that same key. And let's say I get to this one, I go, oh, you know what? I like the one before. There's a back button. And that just takes me back to the last one. Back again, back again, back again. So again, when you're performing live, you can generate these patterns and then you can move around between them by doing the backwards and forwards button here. And that allows you to change up your melodic line, your bass line or whatever within a key in an improvised way, live on the fly with enough control that you're doing it over, you're doing it within the same key all the time. So it's happy accident machine. I mean, you can generate things with this, kind of all day long. Something else that's great about this randomization function, let's say I set down a pattern that I really like the pattern, random, like this. Oops. And let's say I really like this pattern. Let's try it with a kick. Okay, I can do a couple different things. If I want to keep that pattern, I can just move notes up their own kind of row. So. And that's going to stay in key. Or if I go back into that roll the dice mode and I turn the density all the way down past 0, it takes you down to pitch. Then if I hit randomize, it will keep the same pattern, but it'll randomize only the pitch within that pattern. So then you get something going that you like there, and then you can start to kind of jam on it and bring in different drum parts. And if I want to do a similar thing on another track over here, I know I'm in that same key. So then I can bring in different stuff. I can also use that randomization function over here if I want to do that. So on this track that I'm on, the one with the yellow buttons, if I hit that. because I know I'm in key, I can go back to again, I have control over the synth voices here within the Syntakt, so I've got a lot of immediate control. So if I want to do something with that bass line, let's say I want to change up that pattern again. I can go back here and I can go back to my roll the dice mode and just do it again. So, long answer with examples to a short question. Why would you use the OXI with the Syntakt when the Syntakt has such an amazing sequencer? Well, it absolutely, the Elektron sequencers are my favorites. I think they're amazing. As far as devices that have voices built in with them, I don't think there's anybody who does it better. As far as the OXI goes, what's amazing with the OXI One is being able to do things like this. So generating random patterns, generating random pitch within key. This also works with CVs. So if you're doing with a modular, you can generate random CV pitch, sending it into a modular, but staying within a key. You can also do things where you can change up your pitch while you're performing. So again, we'll take that delay off there. So let's say I want to change that from Phrygian to something else. I can go to minor. Let's go back to my favorite Phrygian. But then let's say we want to change the key. You want to do a key change within whatever you're doing. So right now this is done with a root note of E2, but if I change that root note, let's say to G. So now this is Phrygian with a root of G, then I can bring it back to E. None of that is possible here by itself. So when asking why I would use this and not just this, that's the why. It's all about the melodic part of it, notes, keys, having it being key, and allowing for kind of, as somebody just said in the chat, fearless noodling. Yeah, that's kind of the thing. So playing live, I can generate things random, and they'll be random, but they'll have a certain amount of control to them because they'll still be in key. Now, using these two together isn't as simple as this is just a synth and this is just the sequencer, because the sequencers in the Elektron devices can do a lot of really interesting things that a lot of other sequencers can't do. And those things have to do with parameter locking, parameters of synth voices. So with this, I can do probability and things like that a note will occur or what the note will be, and do the random generation that way. But it's really tedious to try and set CC messages to control individual parameters of individual synths from this. But super easy to do within the Syntakt. So let's say, for example, on that voice that we're just working on right here. So let's try, I'll just do a couple of longer notes. So something that sounds like this. So now I can go in and adjust parameters of that sound, right? So like right now I have the envelope set really short, so even though these have a long sustain, they're not doing that. But if I change that in here, and then I've got effects in here, like delays. Now, what you can do with the Elektron boxes that you can't do with a lot of other machines is there's a thing within these boxes that is called a trigless trig, and it's something everybody makes fun of because it's like the super confusing name. So each one of these buttons is a trig or a trigger to do something. Generally, if you place a trigger and you hold it down and you lock certain parameters to that trigger, when the sequencer gets to that point, it will it will sound the note and do all of those parameter locked things. What a trigless trig is, if you hit function and go to there, you notice the trig is yellow instead of a red trig. This is something that you can now hold down and lock things like delay, reverb, filter changes, change of envelope, all of that stuff. Just locked that, oh, sorry, just messed that up. Here, move those things around again, so it will be totally different. Add some delay, open up the envelope. Okay, so all of those changes are locked to a trigless trig. What that means is when the sequencer passes that spot, it will do all of those parameters for that step, but it won't sound the note. So it's a trigger that you can lock things to that doesn't trigger the sound itself. So it's really cool because if you have a really long sound, like these ones here that we were just going over, it will change something in that moment when that long sound plays. So anyway, it allows you to lock things to a position, to a trigger, without triggering the sound. It's really difficult to lock parameters of synths to different things. With this, it's not difficult at all because that's kind of what it's designed to do. So you can have those things run together, which is super, super fun. All right, let's see here. Back to this. Yo, hey, sign out. What's going on? Good to see you on here. I can see the advantage of the scale independent patterns. Interesting. Yeah, it's crazy powerful. I think my two favorite functions of the OXI One is that kind of randomization within key and scale, and the ability to really quickly assign things to different things, so that I can use it with my phone, I can use it with a Syntakt, I can use it with my modular, I can sequence anything I want with it. And all I have to do is just really quickly change up where things are being sent. And just to show you how quick and easy that is, so this is 8 different sequencers, right? So each one of them is being sent to a different thing. So if you just hold down which sequencer you're using and then the track, you can see this is going out on MIDI 1A, this is going out on MIDI 2A, MIDI 3A, MIDI 4A, MIDI 5A. So that's how I had it set up. But let's say I change this up and I want to send this to my modular. If you notice on the back, there's 8 CV and 8 gate outputs from this. So if I wanted, you know, like, let's say that bass line that I was doing before that I really liked, like something like this. So let's say I like that pattern and I wanted, instead of sending it to a voice in the Syntakt, all I would have to do is hold on that, and the track that it's on, right now it's going out on 5A. So I just change it to whatever I wanted it to go out on, so I could send it to a different MIDI channel. So anything from 1 through 16, A, B, C. So a lot of different options there. Or if you just go into the CV mode, these 8 are your CV, these 8 are your gates, and it's kind of set up as a grid so that you can send it wherever you want to send it. So if I want to send number 5 to CV1, and I do that on both, or to a different CV, different gate, then right now this is set up to go out CV gate to different channels that would be then sequenced to a modular. And that's that exact same pattern, but just set up in a different way. So really quick to switch from going via MIDI to going via CV gate. It also has Bluetooth MIDI, which is how I use it with the phone or with an iPad. So when I'm traveling, just connect it via Bluetooth MIDI, work out some cool patterns, come up with this cool, you know, melody or bass line or whatever. And then when you get back here to the studio, just connect it to whatever instrument and you're off and running. So let's see here. So I dig the harmonizer mode. Yeah, that's another cool one. I don't use that a ton because I don't do a lot of polyphonic sequencing. But what you can do is you can set up one of the 4 sequencers to be a chord sequencer or a polyphonic sequencer, and then you can set the other sequencers to follow it. So let's say you have a bass line that's written in the same key as the chords that you're playing. If you change chords in that mode, it'll change any of the other sequencers that are following it. So the bass line will stay the same, but it'll quantize all the notes to fit into the new chord or the new scale. And you know, the ones that kind of make the most sense for that. So it's really super cool. So you can have your whole track follow something that you're playing live, which is also crazy powerful. And I haven't seen anything else that does that like that. So pretty cool. Those would all be good additions to the Elektron Sequencer. I agree. Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head right there. Maybe hard to jam it all into the user interface. But that's one of the things, you know, people talk about this all the time. I get questions about this all the time about, you know, this doesn't do this, that why doesn't this do this? Why doesn't this have this jammed into it, this jammed into it? There are certain machines that I feel personally have too much jammed into them, and it makes them really unruly to play. The Octatrack is actually one of those. It's really got a lot going on, so it's really difficult to get it set up. Once you set it up, like right now it's set up as a performance template, super cool, super easy to use. It's like the Swiss Army knife, you can set it up to do whatever. but it's very difficult to set up because it does so much. Like if it was super easy to use and there was only like 5 functions, then it would be much easier to set up, but because it can do so many things. That's another thing that I've noticed with the MPCs. I tried the MPC Live 2, wanted to like it, wanted to love it because it does a whole bunch of things, but it was really unruly because of that, because you can only fit so many buttons on the face before you start menu diving. Then how do you menu dive in a way that makes sense and keeps it as shallow as possible as far as like the depth of the levels of menus that you go through? And that was one thing that was really hard for me to get comfortable with on the MPC. Was you go into a function, then you'd go into another one, then to a layer of that, then to another layer, then tweak something, then you go back out to something else. And because it does so many things, it's the things aren't really evident and on the surface. Just to talk really quick, I'm going to change up the view so you can see the Syntakt screen here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Elektron workflow, I mean, if you're watching this, you probably are, because I do a lot of Elektron stuff. But one of the things that for me makes the Elektron workflow super, super simple and fast, even though it can do so much, is the way they set up the integration between the screen and the knobs and the menu buttons that are here. So to change from menu to menu, it's just these buttons down here. So it's very quick. You don't have to go deep. There's 5 different menus. Each one of them has, I shouldn't say each one. Some of them have 2 levels. Some don't. Some of them just have 1 level. And then on the screen, there's always 8 functions, or I guess up to 8 functions. And those are in the exact same position as the 8 knobs that are right next to it. So if I want to change something in the synth page, rather than going to a synth menu, then a function thing, then go to the, I don't know, whatever parameter. With this, I can just go synth. I'm on the synth page. I've got these 8 parameters that coincide with these 8 knobs right here. So I can do 1 press, and then I've got control over 8 things, a couple at a time, because they're knob per function once you get onto the page, which is great. Same thing, LFO. This is my LFO. I've got speed, multiplier, fade, destination, wave type, mode, depth. All of those things correlate to these knobs right here. And then if I want to get to the second LFO, I just hit it again. And I'm in that one. And I've got the ability to do that. So going back and forth between like, okay, LFO, filter, LFO, synth, amp envelope. So like it gives you the ability to go really quickly from page to page rather than having to go deep page to page. So they're all like right next to each other. Makes it very easy and very fast to operate, despite the fact that it does a ton of stuff. The other thing, when you talk about the MPCs, when you talk about the MPC workflow, they've got those 4 buttons on the side of the screen. So you've got the touch screen to do some stuff, but then within different, like say within an effect, you might have 4 parameters that those 4 knobs control. Sometimes the parameters are vertical, the same as the knobs next to the screen. And sometimes the parameters are horizontal, but the knobs stay vertical. So you don't know which one coincides with which one. And it gets really confusing when you're trying to do it live and do it fast. With this, the 8 line up with the 8 always. And it's the exact same in the Octatrack, the rhythm, the digitone, the analog 4, they're all the same. So when the Syntakt came out, I remember the very first day I got it, within like 2 minutes, I was making music already, because the layout and the functionality feels exactly the same as the other machines. So once you get one, you kind of understand them all, or at least enough that you can be functional, and then you start to, figure out the depths of what they do. But on the surface, to be able to tweak things live, it's very, very handy. All right, let's see. I think it's how the point devices became lobotomized DAW with fiddly interfaces. Yes, I agree with you. Just got the model cycles on Monday. Cool. That's a great way to kind of get into this workflow, because again, the workflow is the same. It's kind of like a stripped back version of the same workflow, which is great. You know, you get 6 tracks instead of 8. You get like just slightly less, but for a really great deal. So you get a lot of the same sound engines and all that stuff. So those are great. Best user interface in my studio is probably the Hydrosynth for the mapping of functions, buttons, reason. Yeah, it's great to be able to map functions, and that kind of MIDI learn thing I totally love. But again, when you map things, that's kind of like that in-depth setup. Octatrack does that as well, and a bunch of others do that, where you can kind of map things to get it to work. One thing I love about these is that they're super immediate. Like, switch it on and you just jump right in and you're working. Let's see here. What else? You tried the models boxes sample cycle. Surprisingly refreshing to find. Elektron can be knob per function. Yeah, I mean, it really is. Like, those are, like I said, stripped back versions of the digiboxes. And so you get a lot of the same functionality, you get the same kind of workflow. And that whole idea of knob per function that you get in the models and in the digiboxes is the same. So you're on a screen, you have 8 functions, you've got 8 knobs. One knob deals with each thing that's on the screen. It doesn't get any deeper than that. You know, if, like, when I'm playing live, if I wanted to, like what I was just doing with that bass line. So if I was doing, changing up functionality like that, all of that ability to change up that sound and all those different parameters is immediately right there in front of you. If you had, you know, let's say you had a Roland groove box, for example, like a TR8S or MC707 or MC101, and you had your bass line playing on that, and you wanted to change those functions, what I just did on there would have taken you like 15 minutes, and you can't do it in the moment because it's menu, inside menu, inside menu to change one parameter and then come back out, and go to a different area to change one parameter and then come back out, unless you mapped the parameter ahead of time to the one knob you have that adjusts a parameter live. So for me, playing live, like, I tried to use the Roland boxes a bit and just couldn't do it because I was so used to these ones, and being able to, like, oh, I have an idea, I can make that sound. I want to hear this, cool, I can do that right now. With those, there was no way to do that. Like, it was really painful to try and dig through stuff. I was talking with somebody a while ago. He'll remain anonymous because he has a YouTube channel as well, and I don't want him to get any crap for this. But we were talking about workflows when we were at Super Booth in Berlin. And we were talking about the difference between Roland and Elektron and other boxes. And he described the Roland workflow as a hostile workflow. Like, you feel like it's working against you all the time. So you're trying to do something, and it's almost as if the workflow is trying to keep you from doing it. Where when you've got something like these machines, or like the OXI One, or, you know, the 1010 black box, or, you know, there's a bunch of instruments that are set up in similar ways where it feels like they're trying to help you do things. Then you've got other machines, workflows, which just, it's like you're constantly battling against it, which for some people it's not a problem, because if you set up your whole live set in advance, and you've got your 10 tracks that you're going to play, and track 1, then track 2, then track 3, you can preset macros. Okay, I'm gonna in track 3, I want the knob to do this, so I'm gonna set it up in my studio ahead of time, take 10 minutes to get that set up to do the right thing, so that when I play live, I can do that thing. For me, I don't think that far ahead. I can't think that far ahead. So for me, what I do is I like to be able to think of an idea while I'm playing and then do that thing right there live without having to remap things while I'm performing, but actually be able to do it and improvise live. I've said this a bunch before on this channel, but just the idea for me of performing live is that it is a two-way conversation, a dialogue between human and machine. And I want the machines to say things, to do things on their own that I don't do. So like randomly generate a melody line. Like I didn't do that, the machine did that. But then I want to have my input in the conversation where I'm going to go in and tweak the sound, change up a note, modify a rhythm. Maybe I like the rhythm, but I want the machine to come up with the pitch for that rhythm, like what I showed a little while ago. So I like to be able to go back and forth. I get inspired while I'm playing live by the machines that I'm using to play live, because they'll give me ideas while I'm playing. I'll hear something that the machine does and I'll go, oh, that's cool. I wanna, let's go with that. Let's do a thing. So it's almost like collabing with a band while you're playing live. Like if you're a keyboard player and your bass player comes up with a cool riff, it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's make that happen. So this, for me, is set up to be very similar to that. So these machines have a say in what's going on, and so do I. So I'm not just pushing play and doing a predetermined song that I did at one point, which is great for some people, and you get a lot more consistency when you do it that way. Your sets can be all the same. You can play your tracks that you may have released, and the crowd gets to know your tracks. So there's definitely advantages to that. It's just not the way I've decided to perform live. So to each his own, which is amazing that we can all do our own thing. All right, let's go back to the chat here. I think it's great, but now I want to Syntakt. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I am a huge fan of that box. It's funny because as you know, if you've watched this channel a lot, I have a lot of Elektron devices. I have most of them. But since I got the Syntakt, I almost never switch on the Digatone, which I was using a bit before in this same functionality. But kind of like the conversation from a little while ago, why I wouldn't use the Analog 4. Why would I have a box this size that has 4 voices in it when I can have a box this size that has 12 voices in it? So I get a lot more flexibility to go out and perform. So, yeah. Let's see here. I've still not got grips with got to grips with the song mode on the Syntakt. It is good fun though. Yes, it is, and it's the song mode is pretty decent. It's not anything I ever use. Like I said, I don't pre-prepare my stuff, so the song mode is kind of a non-function for me. I know it's there. I played around with it when it first came out because I wanted to learn how to use it, and it's pretty cool. It's kind of a building blocks version of a song mode, and yeah, it's great. It's really cool. Also there's a song mode in the OXI One. If you wanted to use this for something, so if you go into the song mode here, just make sure you can see that. Yeah, so up here, all the way across, these rows on the top are the 4 sequencers. So you can build patterns and fill this up with all kinds of different patterns, and then you can just move the patterns down into the song mode. So you've got sequencer 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you can just say, I want pattern 8 from sequencer 1 to start, and then I want pattern 3 from sequencer 2 with it, and I want pattern 10 from sequencer 3. And that's my first part. And then I can move it in, move the next one in, move the next one in. And you can set up how many times you want each pattern to repeat before it moves on to the next one, so they don't all move at the same time. But it's pretty cool. I mean, it's a way to set it up as well. But again, as you can see, I don't really use the song mode very much, but it's cool. It's a great function. And if you're looking for something with a song mode, the one in the Syntakt and the one in the in the OXI One are both great. And the one in the Syntakt is the same as the one in the Digitact and the Digatone as well. All right, let's see here. TR-8S and 101 are limited, but the 707 has 3 macro knobs per lane. Yes, true. The 707 has way more functionality than the others. They all sound great, and it's, you know, I wish the workflow, I gelled with the workflow a little bit better, because I love the sound of those synths. I think that that Roland does a fantastic job making great sounding synthesizers. But again, you've got 3 macros per lane, but you have to set them up. And so if you want to, you know, like I can go in on this synth voice and I can change, let's see, 8, 16, 24, 5, 6, 27, 35. So I've got basically 51 parameters on this synth voice that I can change at any time. And you know, you talk about having the ability to dial that in. You can also do you can lock any one of those 51 parameters to any trigger at any time. So, and you could lock different ones to every single trigger, every single step in your entire sequence. So just the sheer amount of control that you have over stuff here is amazing. And having a screen, you know, I think the screen size is, for me, it's a great compromise, because I think the one on like the mini log and the deluge and even the one on the Roland machines is really small. So they try to cram a lot of information in one screen and they can't really. So then you have to have another level of menu. With this, you've got enough space without having like a big giant screen like you have on the MPC devices and things like that. So you've got enough to be able to actually see what you're doing functionally. And then you've got knob per function on each page, live in real time without having to set anything up in advance. Let's see, TR-8S is XOX workflow, yeah, 808, 909, with 1 macro knob. I like the faders, and the knobs for the limit are always assigned to the same parameter. Yeah, and you know, with the I had a TR-8S for a while, and I love the faders. That's something that I wish there was a version of the Elektron workflow that had faders that you could use. I told the guys from Elektron when I talked to them last that I would love to see a performance mixer that had some faders and the ability to do a lot of what we're talking about here. One workaround for that, if you like the faders, which I do very much, is this. I've used a bunch in the past. The Launch Control XL, and with the 8 tracks on the Launch Control XL, it actually lines up pretty well with a lot of the Elektron devices, and so you can set and save groups of parameters. So if you wanted to do, like I used to use this with the Digitact a lot, so I would have the 8 tracks be the 8 faders, and then you have mutes that you can use with the buttons down below, and then I would map these to certain parameters within that and just kind of save that as a preset on the Launch Control XL. So without being too expensive and without being too big and taking up too much space when you travel for a show, it's a great option for controlling the Elektron devices if you want to have certain parameters that you can kind of get to easily. But mostly the reason why I used it was for the faders, because you just don't have those. Other than the crossfader and the Octatrack, you don't really get faders here. All right, let's see. Live sets mostly improvised. Yes, I would say. Oh yeah, the next comment. I use the Launch Control XL. Yes, exactly. Great option. So yes, to answer the question, my sets are mostly improvised. So yes, I mean, I would say, so when I go up to, recently since I started using the OXI One, I've started to kind of generate cool patterns. So like, let's see here, just want to save this, make sure. If we go back. So you got projects and patterns within projects. So if I load a different project, well, this one, actually, I just cleared everything out because I like to do that. So I'm a glutton for punishment. I like to just delete everything and start over rather than kind of building on stuff. So what you can do with your projects is you can save different patterns by sequencer. And so, like I said, like for example, sequencer 3 is set up as an 8-track sequencer. So you're not just doing it by track, you're doing it by sequencer. So you could actually have all 4 of these set up as 8-track sequencers. So you can have 32 tracks worth of sequences all on this at the same time. And you can save those. And so what I've been doing recently is kind of saving cool patterns that I like. So in that sense, those aren't totally improvised when I play, but I don't save them as songs where, okay, pattern 1 on this machine is pattern 1 on this machine is pattern 1 is pattern 1, and then I move to pattern 2, and then I move to pattern 3. I'll have, a bass line that I like, and I'll have a melody that I like from something else, and I'll mix and match them and put them together and make something new live. So in that sense, all of that is totally improvised. Even though I'm using patterns. Same thing with the drums. I have this set up with drum kits like you saw, and then I'll have simple patterns set here. So let's see here. So we're just hearing the drums here. So if you look into this drum pattern, so you've got a basic 4 on the floor with a little ghost note that is set to every 4th time, the 4th beat of the 4th time through. So it's kind of a reset, so right there, so when you get to your end of 16 bars. Now, I'll set something basic like this so that I always have things to come back to. As an example, the offbeat hat track. So this is set to have 3, 7, 11, 15 all play all the time, and then you've got 3 triggers here that are all set to happen 25% of the time. So if you listen. So you hear that those ones come in every once in a while, and it's kind of random. So I will do things like that where I'll have things, set up in advance. But if I go in and all of a sudden I decide that, that bass part that I'm playing right now, I want it to be something different, and I want to do. And I'm playing with this bass line and I want to have this kick changed up. I can just change my kick on the fly. So it's really easy to change it up and have it be something else, and then gotta go back to what you're doing. So I will set kind of basic things that I'll come back to when I'm performing, and kind of like but they're very much the basics, so 4 on the floor kick, a offbeat hi-hat, a 16th note closed hat, things like that. I'll have kind of set there ready to go, but again, not set up as like, okay, this song goes with this song, with this song, with this song. I'll set it up as basics, and then I'll mix and match them live. Now that said, with the OXI One, since I started using this, I've been coming up with patterns because it's very easy to do that, again, using different gear and mix and match, which is cool. But generally, when I play live, for the most part, I don't use any patterns. So I'll just have this be a blank sequencer when I get up there, but I'll have it set up already so it'll be in the key that I want to be in. I'll have all of that stuff ready to go. And then the first thing I do before I start is I'll just go into that roll the dice mode and I'll play something. So with that, it just makes it that much more fun, I think, for me. So just as an example, let's do, so that's here. So if I've just got this playing and I want to generate something new in that bass line, I might just come up and go right into that roll the dice mode and go to kind of a medium density, and then just let's try something. So again, you saw I can generate something random and then I can change whatever I don't like about it. So I didn't like that note holding, so I just go back in and adjust that. If I want something that goes up, you know. And then I can go in and start to tweak the sound in here. So everything there was just completely generated in the moment, starting with a randomly generated pattern in key, editing it, hearing an idea, wanting this high note to go there, so I put that in there, go in and modify the sounds, and then we can just start to jam right away with something like that. And then when you've got the effects built in here, you know, let's say you want to So everything you just heard, with the exception of those kind of standard drums that I kept going back to, all of the melodic stuff was all just done in the moment. So I was hearing it along and I said, oh, I want it to have something that is a higher frequency sound that comes in kind of at this point. So then I just key in a couple of notes around that area, bring in a sound that I like, go in and start to adjust the sound, and then get it all to kind of go together. So that's kind of the way I perform live. It's just what you saw there. So like I'll generate something, edit it, change up the sound, and keep going. And I was originally, when I very first was using this setup, I was using the cue from the Octatrack, and I was queuing up things in my headphones that I hadn't brought in yet. It was kind of a complicated way to set it up, but it was working. And I was doing the same with my modular as well, with the WMD performance mixer that has the ability to cue, so I could hear what I was playing. But I stopped doing that because I realized that when I was performing, I would kind of get in my headphones rather than be in the room with the people, and it was really distracting. I was starting to pay more attention to kind of like producing a track than I was to creating a vibe in a room at the moment. And so I stopped doing that. So now I don't cue anything. I don't even bring headphones when I play, except sometimes to make sure that my sound is working before I play or whatever. And the reason being because I have enough confidence that when I bring something in, it's gonna be in key because of what I'm doing with the OXI. And I know the settings on my synths, whether it's the Syntakt or my modular. I know the settings well enough to kind of know more or less the sound. So, like for example, with the kick drum, just to use the simplest example here. So if I have this kick drum and that's the sound, and you can hear it's a very kind of clicky, punchy sounding kick drum. Well, let's say I was playing something a bit more mellow and I wanted something a bit more mellow to come in. I can turn that kick drum off and I can just change the filter to a different type of filter and move it just slightly. And then when it comes in, this will be a more mellow kick drum. Hear how it's kind of like taking the edge off of it? So that's still the same kick. I mean, obviously with the analog rhythm, it's an analog synth engine making kicks. This isn't a sample, so I'm kind of making the kick anyway while I play. So if I've got a kick like this and I want it to come in more punchy, I'm just going to raise the resonance and I'm going to give it more envelope, and then when it comes in, it's going to have more click. If I want it to have more overdrive, so it's important to kind of get to know your gear to be able to play like this, because once you do, you don't necessarily need to hear it beforehand. You can get it kind of close. And then while you're playing live, if you know the gear well enough, as long as you get it kind of close, then you can adjust it and make those adjustments live. And sometimes you'll be playing live and you'll hear over the sound system, things don't sound the way they sound in your headphones or in your studio. So you need to make adjustments. And again, this goes back to why I like these machines workflow rather than say Roland, is that if I want to go in and completely make a new kick, completely adjust everything because it sounds different in the room, I can. If I'm using a sampler or if I'm using a, something that's really difficult to modify, it's almost impossible to do that live while you play. So you're locked into what you set up. And if something goes wrong from that, you don't have a lot of ability to fix it. You just have to kind of go with the flow. And for me, that's much more nerve-wracking than trying to make it up and do it on the fly. So, all right, let's go back to the chat here for a minute. Let's see. So many different ways to use the Octatrack. Yes. I always tell everybody that the Octatrack is a Swiss Army knife, and you use it very much like a Swiss Army knife, where, a Swiss Army knife can be a corkscrew or a knife or a spoon or a file or a saw or tweezers. But you don't ever use it as all of those things at once. And I think where people go wrong sometimes with the Octatrack is that they try to use the corkscrew and the knife and the tweezers all at the same time, and it ends up breaking their head. If you need a corkscrew in your setup, set it up like that and use it. But then if tomorrow you need the knife, set it up like that and use it. And so like right now, the Octatrack can do a lot of things. It can chop samples amazingly. I'm not using that. It can sequence other instruments. I'm not using that. It can live loop, which sometimes, but mostly no. Right now, I'm using this with this template as a performance mixer because it can also mix sound, record into recording buffers, some sound, do all of that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm using it for today. But maybe tomorrow I want to use it as something else. And that's what's amazing about the Octatrack. And that's why there's no other machine like it. I was just talking on EasyBot's live stream the other day. We were talking about how the Octatrack is every single thing the Octatrack does. There's another device out there that does it better than the Octatrack. But there's no device out there that does all the things that the Octatrack does and is as customizable and flexible as the Octatrack is. So that's why, it's still, whatever, 10, 12 years after it came out, it's still as popular as ever, if not more popular, because no one's come up with a device like this that does all of those things and has that flexibility to be able to be so many different things depending on how you set it up. So yes, I agree. There are a million things the Octatrack can do. Let's see. It inspired me to develop my first techno live set with improvising parts. Yes, that's my goal. My whole goal with this channel is to get other people doing this because I have so much fun doing it that I want other people to do it too. So that makes me super happy. You gave me the fun of not only playing planned tracks. Thank you for your streams and videos. Well, you are very welcome, and thank you for getting out of this what I hoped people would get out of this. It's when I set out to do this, the very first videos that I did, it was because there was things that I wanted to learn and I wasn't finding the information online. So once I kind of stumbled through it and learned it myself, I wanted to put a video out and say, well, somebody else is probably looking for this too. So I'm going to put out other information. And I'm not doing this to be a YouTuber. I have a day job, which I love. And it's, fortunately it allows me the time and the ability to do a lot of this stuff. But I don't work for any of these companies. I don't get paid by any of these companies. I don't any of that stuff because that's not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to do is, if I'm not here to tell you, buy this, do this certain way. I'm here to say, if you want to do something differently, here's some ways that you can do it differently. And if you want some ideas about how I use things, here's how I use things, and maybe that'll help. And if I can help you figure out something, I'm happy to help you figure that thing out. So, so that makes me super happy that you got that, and that's what that led you to do your own stuff. That's what it's all about. Let's see, the OXI seems to make the Syntakt way more effective for improvising, 100%. The one huge miss on the Syntakt is that you can't quantize the notes to a scale and then improvise within that. And I hope it comes in a firmware at some point because the device already has the ability to do it because you can do the keyboard fold to a scale and a key. So the device can already do it. Now it just has to be able to do that in time when you're playing. So we'll see. Hopefully they can figure out a way to make that happen. Let's see here. How much are you relying on presets on sounds you previously created? So that's one thing that I do try to create a lot of in advance. So when I'm practicing, one of the things that I'll do is I'll make drum kits. So, but in my drum kits, as an example, you'll see like pad 1 is always the kick. So if I change from one kit to another kit, you're always going to have a kick sound there, but they're all different. So like if I play this kick and then I go and I load another kit, you hear it's another kick, but it's still a kick. And then if I load another kick, it's still a kick, right? It's just a much more aggressive one. So each time I load up something new, I'm always loading up a kick in that slot. So, and I have certain ones that I try to always keep the same. So 1 is always a kick, 5 is always like a bass tom or a rumble. So something that goes with that kick to help it have some rhythm. 10 is always open hat, 9 is always closed hat, and they choke each other. They're in a choke group. And other than that, everything else is kind of free range, and most of it is some sort of percussion, something, although sometimes there's a synth stabs or things like that. I will use snare and clap on too as well, generally, for those things. So that way, when I change kits, even if I'm using the same pattern, it'll make sense. I don't all of a sudden go from a 4 on the floor kick drum to a 4 on the floor clap. It's always going to be a kick in that same slot. Now, similarly when I'm sequencing voices, so whether it's the Syntakt, whether it's in my modular, I try to keep it similar as well. So I'll have, I had this set up, I was messing around and moved stuff around now, but the way I have this generally set up is that the sequencer 1 is the lowest of the frequency spectrum, and sequencer 8 is the highest of the frequency spectrum, and all of these are set to notes and sounds that are in that range. So I don't end up putting in 4 different subs and have it get all muddy and sound like crap when you play it out live. So I try to make it so that way when I'm performing, I'm like, okay, I need something in the high mids. Okay, so then I'm going to go to this track because I know that's kind of my high mid area, and I'll sequence something there, and I know it's going to come in more or less like that. So I'll set up synth voices like that. So like in the OXI choral, I'll use those 8 voices, and I'll set them up where like 1's the bass, 2 is a higher bass, 3 is kind of a low mid bass, then it'll go to like lower melodics, medium melodics, higher melodics. And so that way when I'm sequencing, I at least know where I am so I don't get lost in the middle of a performance. All right. Mark Broom's Octatrack remixes are quite fun. Yeah, he's super good on it too. And it shows like the Octatrack is like a crazy remixing machine as well. That's another thing that it does really, really well, as far as like sampling and chopping samples up, plus sequencing, plus doing all that stuff all within the same thing. It does a pretty decent job of time stretching as well. So if you want to bring in, stems from a track that you're going to remix, like what Mark Broom does, then add in different stuff. It's a very, very cool machine for that, for sure. Let's see. Dropped in at the right time, been pondering keeping it simple at Syntakt plus Digitac with Soft Pop 2, Typhon, Micro Freak, Typhon on the sidelines, Inspire. Yeah, it's, one of my favorite things about this is like, I'm showing you how I use it, but I will never tell you, if you're going to play live, this is the gear you have to have, because I don't even know what gear I have to have. If you notice, I change this up quite often. I like to try different versions of things. And if I like something better than something else, I'm going to swap it in and use that machine. Like I have been using for a long time the Digitac as my drums, and I was using the Analog Rhythm to make the drums. So like those kicks that you were hearing, like this kick it's not a sample. It's made in this machine using the kick engines. So I can modify it and change it any way I want. Right. So you see, like, tons of flexibility. So what I was doing was I would make my kicks on here, sometimes layering a sample, sometimes using just the analog engines in here, and then I would resample them in this machine and turn it into a one shot, and then I was loading those in the Digitact. And the reason being is because I loved making the sounds on here, but the Digitact was a lot smaller. It's like the size of the Syntakt, so it's a lot easier to transport if you're going to travel for a show. This is a much bigger machine, but I'm starting to play around a bit more with the performance effects and the scenes and things like that in here, and a lot more flexible, a lot more depth than what you have in the Digitact. And so I may sacrifice the size just because I like this machine so much. Probably my favorite, well, definitely my favorite drum machine of all time, and probably one of my favorite pieces of kit. Like if I had to sell everything, it would probably come down to these two would be the last things that I would sell. But yeah, so keep it simple, use what you want to use. If you gel with something workflow wise or sound wise or whatever, absolutely use it. Like there's things that I don't like that other people love and they make amazing music with. And there's things that I love and make my music with that other people absolutely hate. That's cool. Do your thing, play with whatever you want to play with, whatever inspires you to make music. This gear that's here is very inspirational for me. This workflow is very inspirational for me, but that's me, and I am not you. So do your thing, and I love that everybody kind of does their own thing. Let's see here. That's how you use the 707 low to high. Yeah, you got to come up with you have to have some sort of a system, whatever gear you're using. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself, the adrenaline going, you're in front of a crowd of people, it's dark, you can't really see your stuff, there's lights flashing in your eyes, and you're like, where's the kick drum? Or where's, I want a bass line, where was my bass synth? So you have to have some sort of organization, and a lot of this gear allows for that. It just kind of allows you to kind of organize it whatever way you want to. But yeah, I would suggest for anybody who's starting to do live performances, if I could give you one piece of advice, it's organize your stuff, because something will go wrong when everybody's staring at you and it's dark and there's lights flashing. So you need to know where your stuff is so you can get out of things, get in and out of sounds, get in and out of parts, restart things, whatever. Yeah, so have a system, have a method to your madness, so that so you don't end up just freaking out when something goes wrong and you're playing live. Let's see here. I thought the rhythm and the Syntakt machines were the same, but do they sound any different? So yeah, it's funny because we've been talking about a lot of the different Elektron devices here. It's just starting to sound like EasyBot's Elektron talk. But so just like the model cycles, model samples are kind of stripped down versions of a lot of the same stuff that you'll see in other devices. Same thing goes for the MK2 devices like the Analog 4 and Analog Rytm with the Syntakt, but you don't get the same kind of a depth. So I'll give you an example. So that kick drum that I was doing with all of the different pages of information, what I can affect that kick drum with, obviously the trigger stuff, so I have velocity, length, probability, all that stuff. Then from within the synth itself, I've got tuning, I have the sweep time of the initial attack, the snap amount, the decay time, the hold time, 3 different choices of waveform within that individual engine. And then, the engine, the BD hard engine is also in the Syntakt, but I don't have any of those functionalities over it. Where the rhythm kind of goes to a whole other level, literally, this is a sample track. So now I can bring in, so here's an example. So if I'm playing this, I've got, like, for example, I have a 909 sample here. I can bring in a 909 sample. to take out my regular kick here. Oh, that's why it's super low. So this is all tuned down much lower. That's why it sounds like that. So I'll bring in this other version of it. So this is another kick sample, right? That one by itself. That's why it was looped. I'm bringing this one back in here. So, yeah, so you have the ability to add a sample to what you're doing. I've got some other sample kicks in here. So let's try this one here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so here's a 909 sample, right? I had my start point set, so it's starting weird places. That's why I was doing that. So anyway, so now I can tune this. Right? So that's that 909 sample. Then if I go back to my regular synth voice, that's just the synth voice. But if I want to blend those two, so now I have a blend of those two kicks. So now here's it without the 909. That's blended. And here it is without the synth voice. But then together, you have this new kick. Right? So then with that, you can then resample that, and then that new kick becomes a kick sample that you can load into whatever drum machine you want. So can't do any of that in here. You can do some of the stuff within the initial synth voice, but most of those parameters you don't have here. Very different parameters here. Some of them even better than this, because this is a newer machine. One thing that's cool that this has, if you that the Syntakt has, if you double click the filter, you have a bass width filter. So without sacrificing your filter, you can actually cut off highs or lows with different sounds. This one does not have that yet. Hopefully they'll add that in a firmware update. But yeah, so they're very different. The initial engine, the initial kind of oscillator sound that it's coming from is the same. Yeah, all of those engines. So like if you look, like if you go to the synth engines, you've got oh sorry, I'm not on a kick track. So yeah, if you go to the synth engine, you've got hard classic FM plastic silky sharp. You've got hard classic FM plastic silky sharp. Same synth engines to start with. Way more fine adjustment and fine control over it in this than you have here. Way more user friendly here. This you can also layer with samples or take that out and just put a sample on each path. This doesn't have that at all. So yeah, tons of similarities, but this is a way deeper version of what this can do. But the engines are the same. So yeah, if you want to get started working with those engines, then yeah, those are great. Let's see here, just to pick up on what you said about this becoming the easy mod Elektron talk. What other gear do you use besides the Elektron gear? Do you sample other gear and use that in your presets? So, what other gear do I use? So I have it right here, but I wasn't using it today. I have a 1010 black box, which I use. It's generally right here. And that is for any kind of longer samples, because again, since I'm improvising, I don't know what key I'm going to be in. I don't know what tempo I'm going to be at. So I need something that does really well with time stretching samples. So even though this has the ability to sample, I don't have any space in this for it to sample because I'm using other stuff. When I was using the Digitact, it's not very good at time stretching. So that's when I started using the black box. So I use this very much like you would use like launch clips in Ableton. So I'll set it up so that I've got a longer sample, whether it's a vocal or an atmosphere or something like that. And I'll just launch it and it'll play loop in time with everything else that I'm doing. And if I change tempo, it changes tempo with it and time stretches the sample. So sometimes I will sample other gear that I have here in the studio and load those into the black box. So we're talking about live gear. Live gear, I generally use this stuff. Sometimes not the rhythm, but I use the Digitact instead. I have my modular case, which if I grab this so you can see. Here's this mess. But that's my modular case that I generally use to play live. And that will take the place in the setup of what the Syntact's doing right now. So the Syntakt would come out and the modular becomes all of the melodic voices while I have another machine handling drums. And then, like I said, I do sample other stuff in here sometimes for use in performances, and I'll generally load that into the black box. But most of the performance stuff is designed to be small carry-on luggage so that when I fly somewhere to play a show, I can take everything with me and I don't have to check a bag. Now that said, it tends to be pretty Elektron heavy when I'm playing live. But in the studio, here I can show you this. So I have a couple different setups, racks. So Polybrute, an SH101, a subsequent 37, Deluge, another OXI, which is sequencing the SH101. And then over on this side, another modular case, Percons, Digatone, Quadranted Swarm, a couple of different Moog synthesizers. So a MS-20, the mini version of it, and stuff like that. So yeah, I do use a lot of stuff other than Elektron stuff for sure. But when we're talking about performing live, the vast majority of the stuff I use performing live is Elektron. For the same reason that EasyBot does. He and I talk about this all the time, that we seem like we're these Elektron fanboys because we use all their stuff, but we are both very much of the mind that if something works better, I'll totally use it for what I want a specific thing to do. So that's one of the reasons why I'm using the OXI One, is because I've got plenty of sequencers here in this setup, but the OXI One does things that the other ones don't do, so it kind of earned a place in the setup. Same thing with the black box. It's much better at the kind of longer time stretch samples. The user interface is great, and it's tiny. It's great to take with you when you're traveling. So it earned a space in the setup because it's so good. And if something else came along that I liked better than any piece of gear here, it would be out and I would put that in. But for me, for live performance, these are the best at what they do for my style of performance. Rather than, it may not be the best for your style of performance or the type of music you do or the way your head works. For me, this setup works very well with the way my brain works when I'm performing live. So it's great to be able to jump in and do that stuff with these machines because it all makes sense to me, whereas other machines don't. And then there's other people that can't stand the Elektron workflow and they would much rather be on an MPC. Awesome, that's great for them. And if that's how they can play, I saw when I was at Superbooth in Berlin, I saw this guy from Polyend. His performance name is Isobutane. He played an entire show on a Polyend play, and it was amazing. And so cool. I mean, if that's what works for him, that's awesome. And everybody should be on the gear that works for them. So don't ever take anything I say in any of my videos as I'm saying you should get this. What I'm saying is, here's what it's good at, here's what it's not good at, here's what I like about it, here's what I don't like about it. If any of that gels with you, awesome. And if it doesn't, that's awesome too. It's all good. All right, so let's see here. Why the 1010 rather than say an SP404? So I played around with the SP404 and I thought about it, but why the 1010? I will show you why the 1010. Because this is how big the 1010 is. And yeah, the SP404 isn't huge, but my entire live setup fits, including my modular case, fits into my rolling carry-on and my personal item backpack when I travel, along with clothes. So I don't need to take anything else. I don't need to check any bags. And so every piece of gear has to be super functional for the real estate it takes up in my bag. And the 1010 Black Box just does everything I need it to in a much, much smaller package. So, was there knobs behind all the spaghetti? Yes, there are knobs in there, believe it or not. Let's see. Are there any hardware devices that would send pre-written MIDI sequences to my synths? Yes. I mean, that's what we've been talking about here. That's what this is. This is a sequencer that you're writing MIDI and you're sending that out. And this can send out, so this has 4 sequencers that can each be up to 8 tracks. So you can have 32 tracks of sequencing. This has MIDI out, A, B, and C, all 3 with 16 channels. So you can get basically 48 channels of different devices MIDI sequenced from this one machine. Yeah, so that's what that is absolutely set up to do. Let's see here. Do you use MIDI controller to launch your samples in the black box? I used to. I actually used to use the Launch Control XL as to use the faders and stuff. But actually, I use it so little in performance. It's mostly for vocals or for kind of a background atmosphere. So I'm almost never changing it up in performance. So it's just as easy for me to just use the touchscreen and just launch something there and then fade it in with the knob rather than try to bring a whole nother controller just to do that function. If I was using it a ton, like if it was something that I was bringing things in and out in every, thing that I was playing, I would definitely use the MIDI controller with it just to avoid that one layer of menus. But I'm using it so little and for really specific things, so it's fine like that. I haven't found the need to. Let's see here. Tape pusher. I have long chord lead MIDI sequences that I send to the Analog 4 MK2 from live. Wondering if there's a nice way to go DAW-less. Yeah, well, the thing is, I think what you're asking is there a way to take those MIDI sequences that you have in Ableton and send them, so with something like the OXI, you would have to rewrite them in the OXI to send them. This is going to start a whole other conversation, but your option right now is to spend all the money to buy the Push 3 standalone, and then you can move over everything from Ableton into your standalone Push 3, and then use that to sequence whatever you want to sequence using the MIDI or CV outs. So yes, there is that way to do it. Let's see here. Blackbox seemingly has no limit on how long a sample is and how much you can pack into a memory card. So it's perfect for loading up stems for live. Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's one of the cool things about it is that it has a micro SD card here on the front. I don't know if you can see that. But yeah, so you can load everything in the micro SD card, and if you run out of space, just get a bigger one. let's see here, Simon. I find when I'm creating patterns, things tend to get really disorganized really quickly. I'm with you. And then I spend an age trying to tidy up afterwards, moving kick to track one. You get the same. I get where you're coming from, and I was there I was there a while ago, and I got so frustrated with that I started to basically set things up in patterns and templates from the beginning. So, like if I'm playing with my analog rhythm, playing live, track one is always the kick. If I bring my digitact and I use that to play live, track one is always the kick. So I always know where the kick is. And when I'm building sounds, I build the kick on one. If I'm starting with a bass line and not a kick, I'm not going to start on track one. I'm going to start on my track where my bass lines go. Or if I want to start with a tom rhythm or a percussive thing, I'm going to start on that track and keep all those tracks the same rather than trying to switch it up and move it around later. That's just, it's not any fun. I got sucked into doing that too, and it's no fun at all. Another thing that I love about the OXI One is that if I write something on one track and I decide that I want it to go to another voice, I can try it out just by changing the routing. Instead of sending it out on MIDI 1, I send it out on MIDI 4, and it goes to a new voice, and it sequences that other voice. So I can try things out by doing it that way, which is something else that I really, really enjoy. Let's see here. The black box, and have since replaced it with Razzmatazz for sample launching. Unfortunately, it did lead me to acquiring the digitact. It's the of 1010 of those little the small boxes. I can't remember what the name of the line is. The one I really love that I definitely want to try out in my setup, and I'm going to get it at some point soon here, is the lemon drop, the granular one. And the reason being, when I was at Superbooth in Berlin, I was talking to the guys from 1010, and Tim was showing me all the different stuff that can do. And one of the things that I had no idea that it could do until he showed me is it can granulate a live input. So like I was saying, I use the black box for atmosphere. So that's generally kind of just like a background, whether it's a staticky sound or a drone or something that kind of gives a foundation and fills out the sonic spectrum of a song to make it sound more kind of like a finished track, even though it's being played live. I love the idea of splitting the output of my modular and having it go through that granulator and using that. So whatever the modular is putting out, that also becomes at the same time the source information for this kind of granular background information. So I'm definitely looking at the lemon drop. I haven't tried the Razzmatazz, but it looks pretty cool too. Again, though, it goes back to what we were talking about with these. When you try and so the Razzmatazz is basically a full drum machine groove box in that tiny little form factor. And when you cram so much into that, you've only got so many buttons, so it ends up being a lot of menus you have to go through. And it makes it a little bit clunky, but that one's actually very cool. I mean, I love that they managed to pack a lot into those little machines. Let's see here. Do you use the Novation XL to control the effects or track levels in the Octa or Digi? If so, do the levels change when switching patterns? So I did. That was something that I used to use a lot. And one of the things that was a problem is that it was generally, so you have a couple different ways that you can set it up. One is so that it jumps to whatever level your fader or your knob is at as soon as you touch it with a new input. Or you can do it where it's like a hook method, meaning that you go to whatever level it is and then it grabs it and then you can go. So it got really frustrating because either I would get these huge jumps in sound or I would have to like change things and I wouldn't hear anything, so then I'd have to like knock the fader up and down really quick in order to like catch it wherever it was and put it where it was. So that's why I stopped using it. It was too much of a pain like that. When you would change kits basically when you would change from sound group to sound group. So yeah, so I didn't do that. Let's see, art of sound. Do you use the Octatrack solely for effects options, or do you incorporate other features of the device? So in this template that I'm using right now, the one that EasyBot came up with, it basically uses all the functionality of the Octatrack. So it's using looping and recording buffers and all different types of tracks, from through tracks to neighbor tracks, every effect that it has, compressors. It uses all of that in there. So the answer to your question is yes and no. Yes, I use it only for as a performance mixer and the effects side when I play live. That's the functionality I use it for when playing live. But the way it's set up, that uses all of the functionality of the Octatrack. So you're using sampling and resampling and looping, all that stuff. So yes, it's using all the functionality, which is why no other device can do what this does yet. And so yes and no. But I will say that's not the only way I use the Octatrack. That's the only way I'm using the Octatrack live right now. But that template is basically just a project that you open and then you play. It's already set up with the inputs and with everything, so you play through it. But if I just load up another project, this can become a drum machine. Or if I load up a different project, this can become a sampler and a looper with 3 sample tracks and 2 through tracks that I can use for synths. So when you get an Octatrack, I always recommend to people build some templates. So you've got different use cases that are set up as, and just save it as, 2 synth in is the name of the project, or sample chopper is the name of the project, and then have everything set up. Take hours and hours and hours to set up the machine, set up that template exactly the way you want, and don't make a track on it. Just set it up and then save it as a template. Then when you want to use it as that thing, open up that template, do a quick save as whatever your new track is going to be, so you keep your blank template as what it is, and then write using that template. And so it makes it a lot easier, and you don't lose all of the setup time and effort that you had when you were building all of that stuff, and you don't have to start it all from scratch again. Let's see. So anything else like it? What were we talking about? The Innovation Launch Control XL. Yeah, so I have 2 other MIDI controllers here that I really like a lot. And I'll grab those. Here's one. Where my other one is. So, and if you've seen this one, the Chic, which is cool. You can see it like size-wise compared to like the Syntakt. It's a little bit smaller and really thin. And this one has 8x4. So if you were going to set this up to control something that has, like the Digitakt that has 8 tracks, you could have 4 parameters per track. If you're going to set up something like the Black Box that has 16, you might want to set it up like in pairs, so that you've got that, or groups of 4, so that way you can have the functionality that you want. So that's a really good one. And then the other one that I use sometimes, where did I put it? I don't know where it is the Faderfox PC12, and that's got 72 knobs, and it's about the same size as the Octatrack. So depends on what you want, how much control you want, and how much individual knobs you need. But there's a lot of different controllers out there, but I always kind of run into that same problem with how do you control it? How do you control that jump from one parameter to the next when you go from one set of sounds to another set of sounds? If you've got something that you're not going from, you're not bouncing around between different set of sounds, it's actually much easier to use MIDI controllers, because then you don't have to worry about that jump. So yeah, let's see here. Did you consider the Hapax versus I think you mean the OXI? Yes and no. It's I've tried a couple of other sequencers, the Hapex, the Squid, a couple of others, but nothing does what the OXI does. And you've got the form factor. I was talking a lot about why I use the black boxes. Form factor won out over everything else. And yeah, I could have used a Hapex as well, but it's much larger. And this one is small. Bluetooth MIDI as well. It's battery powered, so it's got a lot going for it. So yes, I consider that, but not for very long. The OXI One is definitely my choice. Let's see here. Just leaving the world of gear temporarily. Who are your musical influences? Who are you listening to right now? Oh, great question. Musical influences. Well, I'm super old, so my musical influences go back a long way. But I played in bands in high school and played, guitar in like blues rock cover bands, playing like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton and George Thorogood, like all different kinds of stuff. But while I was playing in bands like that, I was listening to I started off electronic wise, listening to things like Depeche Mode and New Order and The Cure and things like that. That morphed into a bit more electronic and a bit harder, and went to like Ministry and Nine Inch Nails and Front 242 and Skinny Puppy and like things like that. And then that just kind of kept going. It was like always this kind of electronic thing in the background. So I was listening to a lot of electronic music while I was playing a lot of kind of traditional, cover band music. And then I realized that, that I started to learn how to make the music that I was listening to. And that's when I really got into it. And I was DJing at that same time, and DJing a lot of house and techno as well, and started producing, and then that just kind of got me kind of going in that. But yeah, listen to a lot of different stuff. Right now, I think my favorite playlist that I listen to right now all the time is, I don't know if you're familiar with an artist called Developer, but it's probably my favorite Spotify playlist right now is Developer Radio, just because there's a lot of great stuff in there. But very similar stuff to the stuff that I perform and the stuff that I produce as well. So I really like that. Big fan of Rod Hat as well. Big fan of Surgeon as well. I mean, lately that I've been doing a lot more live performance and a lot less DJing. It's a lot of what I'm listening to and getting inspired by is live performers, and particularly live performers that are playing improvised music, kind of like the style, like Speedy J and Steve Rocknut, that they play together as Speedy and Steve. Their stuff is absolutely amazing improvised techno music that they're playing on hardware, making it up in the moment, truly playing their instruments live rather than reassembling tracks that they produced in a studio and disassembled so that they could reassemble them live. And that's kind of my favorite types of artists right now are the ones that are doing that. If you've ever seen the STOOR events, STOOR, check out their channel on YouTube. It's amazing. But they do an event every year at ADE in Amsterdam. The best event I've ever been to in my life was the STOOR event last year. And it's 4 artists that are playing live improvised techno together. So it's not like a back-to-back. It's that they're all kind of contributing to one sound that's coming up. And Speedy J is kind of the conductor of everything, and he has the mixers and the effects, and is kind of like deciding which pieces and parts are coming from each of the artists that he's blending together into full tracks that are then coming out. But everything is 100% live and improvised, so it's not nothing's pre-planned. So these are, for me, they're like the most talented artists I've ever seen. Lady Starlight, Dasha Rush, there's a whole bunch that have played in that, and it's just, they're amazing. So yeah, that's what I listen to. Long answer for a short question. Let's see here. Do you ever use a DAW with your outboard gear on stage? On stage, no. When I started performing live, I had been DJing for almost 30 years and producing for about 20 years. And when I started to play live, it was because I wanted to perform live. I wanted to do live production on the fly in front of people using hardware. So for me, I didn't want to bring my production gear. I didn't want to bring my DAW and play with that because I use that in the studio for sure. I use Ableton and have since like Ableton 4. So I definitely use a DAW. It's not that I'm just like some DAW-less purist. I just like the idea of playing hardware machines live. Now that said, I got the Push 3 recently and am absolutely loving it. And who knows, that may be a setup. I was actually thinking the other day, I had to get some cables, which actually arrived today, so that I can split the CV out signal from the Push 3 to go out to my modular. And that may end up being a new setup that you see at some point, whether it's here in the studio to just mess around on, or whether it's to play live on, is the Push 3 with my modular case to be able to get the hands-on and the tactile of the modular, but with all of the advantages of the Push 3, of the effects processing and being able to put a mastering chain on your outputs so that you can have really great sounding music. It's very, very interesting. So I may end up go that way. Let's see here. We're traveling to perform. What carry-on case do you use for your Octa, Digi, and other gear? So I have, if you're familiar with Away rolling carry-on bags, but I use it's called the larger carry-on. I have the aluminum one. And my modular fits in one side of that, and then I put all my clothes in the other side. And then in my backpack, which is a nomadic, this one, you can see, this backpack right here, that fits all of this gear, so all of the boxes. So the Octatrack, when I went to Berlin recently, it was Octatrack, Digitact, OXI One, Black Box, and Analog Heat, all fit with just a deck saver inside my backpack. So I didn't feel like I needed to put them in any bigger case than that because I was carrying them on me in my backpack. If I was packing them into a bag, I'd want to put them into a full case, but just a deck saver and putting them in there together has been enough for me. Let's see here. Came in through industrial also that added house and psytrance as influence. Yeah, it's funny because like when I started DJing house before techno, but I was listening to more techno than house. And so both have been big influences. I still love it. Actually, I'm going to be DJing a house show, like a deep house rooftop, cool groovy vibe show next month. I produced a bunch of deep house and kind of more classic style house music as well as techno, but techno's kind of definitely where my love lies. Let's see here. What's your favorite rumble technique when working with the Elektron boxes? So if I'm making a drum in the rhythm, I like to keep them separate. So I'll put the kick on one and then I'll have the rumble on a separate channel. And the reason for that is because I like to sequence the rumble. So you can see this is that's sequenced, and then I have total control over that sound. And not only when I'm making it, but also when performing as well. So if I'm performing and I've got this kind of subtle rumble with my kick, but then I want to have it be more pronounced, ton of control when you keep them separate like that. So I like to do that. So I like to sequence the rumbles so that way you have a ton of control over it. Then with as I mentioned with this gear, a lot of times I like to take this gear and then resample it and load it into the Digitact. So I'll do the resampling puts the two together. It puts the rumble with the kick if you just resample the main, but you could also resample it onto two different samples and then load it into the Digitact on two different tracks if you want. So whichever way you would like to do that. Let's see. Jacko Jack will be at store this year. Yes, I saw that lineup and it's going to be amazing. He looks like you're wearing the II headphones. Yes. Neutral enough for mixing. I mean, you know what? It's as far as mixing and mastering in headphones, it's for me, it's always a question mark because there really is no perfect solution for mixing and mastering in headphones. But that said, every solution is perfect if you get to know the sound of your headphones. So if your headphones sound a certain way, and you know that sound, then you're going to be able to, if you know what things sound like in your headphones, and you know what that track then sounds like on a club system, you can make club system tracks in your headphones, even though you're not hearing it exactly the same way. The key is whether it's headphones, whether it's speakers, whether it's sound treatment in your room, whatever it is, it's really important that you get to know your gear. Like that's the key. Once you get to know it, it's fine. You can kind of do whatever. Speaking of that, I think my battery is about to die in these, so I'm going to plug them in. I was using these for quite a while before I started this live stream, so the battery is almost dead. In the meantime, let's see, what else do we have here? Cool. All right, so there we go. All right, yeah, so it looks like we're done with the questions for now. So back to some music for a little bit. If you've got any other questions, feel free to write them in there. Happy to answer whatever. So now let's go back to this. So again, very easy to clear everything out, which I'm a big fan of doing. I don't save a lot of stuff because I would rather. So I guess when you're preparing to play live, there's a couple different ways that you can do it. You can make tracks that you're going to play live and spend hours and hours refining them and dialing them in and getting them just right. That's one way. A very valid, amazing, consistent, great way to play live. Another way to play live, which is the way I choose to play, is rather than spending hours making tracks, I spend hours practicing, playing on my gear, learning how to make the sounds that I want to make, learning where everything is, organizing things and structuring them in such a way that I can improvise stuff. So let's just take, we've got our kick and, so we've got our drums still here. I'm just going to leave those. I'll do another video at some point on how I build drums and drum kits and all that stuff. That'll be a whole other long video, I'm sure. But with this, what I just wanted to show is really quickly how I kind of make something when I'm playing live. I mean, this is basically the way I play live as well. But this is how I do it when I'm practicing, because I want to practice the way I'm going to play live, because I'm not writing tracks. I'm practicing, so it's different. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but I'm just yapping at this point. So let's see. On this track, as you know, we've got a whole bunch of different sounds in here that we're messing with. And you know what I'm going to do, just to make this extra fun? I'm going to start a completely new project. Okay, so, okay, that's the basic kit that loads up, the basic sound palette that loads up when you load up your Syntakt. So, I have all the sequences coming from here. It's all set up to be, you know, in the right key and all of that. Let's see here. So, yeah. I do need it to be in the right note. Okay. So, it's all set up to be to where I can now start to use this, but I've just got basic sounds. So let's go to track 5, because that's like kind of a bass-ish sound. And let's just put in something kind of random and see what this sounds like. Okay, and then so this is how I generally would write a bass line. I did a whole video on this, which you can check out on my channel, and I used the analog 4, but it's very much the same way. So I'll put in a rhythm first that I like, and then I'll go in and start changing individual notes. Here, I'm gonna get these back all to E like they were supposed to be, because I forgot to do that first. All right, so now they're all on E2, and now I can start to mess with this. All right, so now we have kind of a generic bass line. Cool, we can get started with that on a generic sound. So this right now, if you go into the synth engine, this is just the tone engine, but if we change to another one. So you've got a couple of different choices of engines here. Let's keep it on the tone one for now. And now we can start to shape the sound in a way we want. Now, there's a couple of options here. If you just hold function and move this, now you can start to go through the browser and you can find sounds. You can actually filter these. So you can say, I just want bass sounds, and then go back over here and say, okay, let's load this one. So you can load it in presets if you like, right? Or what I like to do is just go ahead and start making stuff. So I'm just gonna take this preset and use it to make something. One thing that I always like to do, especially when I'm using sounds that are, even though this isn't an analog engine, it's a digital engine, sounds that are more analog or FM sounding, I like to dirty them up a bit because I'm going to filter them later, and you get a lot more flexibility in the sounds that you make when you filter later. So if you like, so if you get something that's like really dirty and like lots of harmonics and stuff like that, then when you go into your filter, So you get a lot of flexibility, so you can smooth it out by filtering things off, or you can dirty it up by opening it up. So it gives you a lot of dynamic possibilities when you're performing later on. So it's just something that I like to use as a way to come up with sounds. Now, one of the reasons why I like to mess around with this is, again, because this is the way that I'm going to perform. So if I come up with a sound that I like, it's like, okay, cool. Now I'm getting used to where the controls are, how I make a sound, how I shape something. But I may save this sound, but not the pattern. And then I may come back to that sound and go, oh yeah, cool. I really like that sound. So I'm going to go in and use the sound again, but I'm going to make a new pattern for it. So always an option with this kind of a setup. Also, having it go through the Octatrack with all the effects and having a separate drum machine means that you've always got those things that you can use to make it into something that sounds more like a track. So if you want to test out this bass line and say, how will this sound in context without having to write a whole song? You've got some drums here already that you can use. So if we're just trying this out and we want to see, you know, what do these sounds sound like? Do I want to add some effects to it, whatever? And I'm like, I wonder what this will sound like. Well, I've got drums here, so I can just go. Right? And you can kind of hear it's like, okay, yeah, I like that's grooving against the bass or against the kick, kind of the way I thought it would, right? So it's like, okay, I like the way that's going, so that's really cool. Now I can see how it would sound like wow, what would that would sound like with a break and a drop. So then I can go into my effects here and I can take these out. And I can try it with a build-up. Right? So it gives you a way to kind of audition patterns, audition sounds, like try them out in the context of a track. And so, you know, when I'm producing in the box, when I'm in Ableton, I have performance macros that I leave on my master track. It's actually not a master track. I send everything to kind of an effects track that has all those performance on it before it goes to the master. And then the master track is just mastering stuff. And I delete that track out before I mix and master the track, but I use those macros to perform the track, to try out automation before I build it into the track. So I can go and say like, oh, what do I want this to sound like? How much, what would this sound like if I filter this all the way out to nothing? And then I can hear like that bass sound we were just listening to. So if I'm listening to that, what would that sound like with a filter? Or what would it sound like with a low pass? Or with some other effect? Alright, so that's cool. So that I kind of dig. So now I've got one track of something that I like, one pattern that I like that thing. Now I'll go in and remember the idea that I mentioned before where we've got kind of lower to higher. It got kind of messed up with this sound palette that I put in here, but let's try adding in something else. So if you've got a lot of kind of like kick, rumble, and kind of a mid-range bass instead of a low-range one so it doesn't cloud those things up, you want to fill out the sonic spectrum in the areas that you don't have yet. So the higher parts, so highs, high mids, and things like that. So maybe trying out, just a couple of sounds on, let's see, we'll try this track and just see, I don't even know. Yeah, the toy. So this sound, this engine is very kind of percussive. It's called toy, but it's kind of like, if you think about like a little kid's like xylophone, that's kind of what it sounds like. So I'll just add in a couple of random notes here and hear how that sounds. And now let's see how that would sound with effects and drums. So again, just by messing around with it, you can say, okay, how would this sound in the context of a track, in the context of playing this live? Okay, cool, let's try it with some dynamics, with some automation, with some effects, with different drums, with things like that, and hear how those things work. So that gives an idea of like, okay, this is maybe how I would use this to perform this. So I like this sound not just as a static sound, but I like this as a tool that I can use when I'm playing, because that bit here, just mute this so you can just hear that by itself. So just being able to change the decay, there's two different decays on this, so by being able to lengthen those out, you know, bringing that with an effect is a great way to add energy and tension, and then drop it back down into a more percussive sound. Right, so as I was making that, I would say, okay, sound design wise, I would use that sound because I could use it in this way. This might be a context where I could use that. Then as I start to make things, I like to have things that kind of play off of each other. So maybe I'll go to another sound and just have it do kind of echo the same thing. Yeah, I would just echo the same thing, but a couple of notes earlier. Actually, I'm gonna pull that back even more. So then it becomes like kind of like a call and response thing. So that's going to track 7. What voice is that? Sure, the percussive-y sounding one. So let's hear how that sounds. I'm not a huge fan of that sound, so I'm going to change engines here. And let's use this one, mess with it a little bit. note sounds together. Shorten that up a bit more. Okay, and then let's see how that would sound with drums. And so when you put it into context, you go, okay, that sound that I thought sounded okay, now it's sloppy and it's kind of messing things up. So now I'm going to go in and refine that sound in context. What I'll end up doing with this from the standpoint of performance, and I just got asked on here, roughly how much time do you spend creating presets versus making tracks? When I'm working on live stuff, I don't make tracks, so like 100 to 0. But when I'm making presets, it's very much like this. So I'm gonna come up with a bank of sounds that go well together, that fit together sonically. Then, just like a drum kit that I can put different patterns with, I can sequence different patterns with these sounds that go well together. And I know it's gonna sound like something cohesive because I've set it up so that it's I don't know, it's a cohesive sonic, group. So there's not, 5 things in the low end, 5 things in the high end that are all competing with each other and making it sound bad, but it's things that kind of fit together, because we don't have the luxury when we're performing live, we don't have the luxury of mixing and mastering a track. And so we have no choice but to get things to fit together properly from the beginning, because I'm not going to improvise some track and then spend the next 3 hours EQing a sound. I need to make sure that sound works, that sound connects, that sound fits with all of the other sounds that are in that same bit of performance. So again, context is everything. So you hear this in one thing, and it sounded one way like this, and then when you add in this, these sounds needed to be shortened up. Something else that I love to do when I'm coming up with patterns like this, and I do this a lot when I'm improvising as well, is I like to add in things that are polymeters or polyrhythms, depending, like different in different contexts. So I'm gonna get my other camera back up and running here. Battery died, had to plug it in because I've been talking too long. See here. Sorry. Yeah, so adding things. So the first thing to do is we want to do something that is a different pattern length than what we're doing here. So let's just pick another one of these kind of higher end sounds, and we'll just add in, trying not to double up the notes too much so they're not over the top of each other. Because again, just like with and just like I was saying before, we're not going to go in and sidechain compress and do all that stuff. So we have to be conscious of, are our notes overlapping? Are they sitting one on top of the other? Because we don't have the luxury of being able to go back in and do anything like that. So it's great to be able to know how to do it this way, so you don't have to go back in and fix it the other way. Okay, camera's back up and running again. Sweet. So yeah, so being able to set stuff up in this kind of way. So I'm not sure what this sound is going to be. Let's see here. Let's try it out and see. Synth engines. We can do something a little bit different here. We use the Swarm one, which is kind of like it's a multi-voice unison. So let's try this one here. See what it sounds like. Really shorten this up a lot. This to be more percussive. All right, so this by itself. So what we're going to do now is change the end point of this. So right now, I'm just going to keep that up. And then I'm going to change up the endpoint. So instead of being 16 steps like everything else, let's try 8. Let's actually try just 5. And then we're going to bring this way down in the mix. I'm going to filter it way out again. So I'm going to change that filter type. There we go. That's what I want. There we go. Trying to get it to be more percussive because we just want it to be an off-time item that keeps everything interesting and keeps it from getting too loopy all at the same time. So we'll try this with the other 2 higher sounds and see how they sound together. So you see how it adds kind of tension to it because you're waiting for it to line up, and every certain number of times it will line up together, but not always. So then let's try it with the bass line. add some drums into that. So just to give an idea of how I can build something up from scratch, and you'll see a lot, like I was talking to somebody recently about this, about like kind of how to write techno, like what makes it techno. And one of the things is keep things simple, keep things interesting, but also it's really all about the sound design. So you spend a lot of time coming up with sounds, and that's why I design a lot of sounds for what I'm going to go play, and then the rhythm I can write on the fly, the melody I can write on the fly, but the sound design is what takes a lot of time, and so that's why I end up making a lot of sounds. I don't necessarily save them as sounds, I actually never do. I save them as a project, and that project is a kit for me, so then I can just switch kits mid performance and just go into a whole new set of sounds and things that kind of work together, and then I'll write new sequences to go with those sounds as we go. So let me take a few more things off of the chat here. Let's see here. Yeah, so create the kit, and the kit works as a unit. Do you ever have any sidechain ducking? Not really, because there's not a good way to do it. There's ways, I use the analog heat, and there's ways to do it using the envelope follower. So you could make it kind of sidechain, but it's still not really a sidechain. And so, no, I have to basically set this up so that it works well. So what I do sometimes is, if I'm building a big long sound, like a pad or something that like will flow over into it, and it's in a similar sonic area from where the kick would be, I can go in and I can sequence duct steps. And because it's techno, the majority of those duct steps should be on the 4 on the floor beat. So you can kind of cheat it that way. So you can kind of sequence in ducking, but I don't have anything that's set up to do it automatically. So yeah. Let's see here. Are you using the Octa just as a mixer? Do you keep your kicks on its through track of the Octatrack? So yeah, just real quick again, the way that Octatrack is being used is, yes, it's a performance mixer. So melodic stuff from this side. So when I have the black box, it actually runs into the inputs here, and then this runs with these orange outputs here, runs into C and D inputs. of the Octatrack, so right side, and then drums and percussion go into the A and B inputs, and then the performance template is set up so that it's affecting drums on A and B, melodics on C and D, and so you've got things that are split and separated out like that. So yeah, and then it goes through all of the different effects that way. Let's see. Oh, and just to let you know, so the melodics come into these tracks on this side, the drums come in on these tracks. So it's a through track, neighbor, neighbor, and then a flex at the end, and a through, neighbor, neighbor, flex. So it's the melodics are running into a through track where it gets two effects. Then it has two neighbors where there's two effects each. So that's how these templates can be set up. So you have a total of 6 effects that you can use on that signal at any one time. And so those are set up into these different scenes based on using those 6 effects per track. So yeah, thanks for everything today. Thank you, Simon, for tuning in. Good to see you. Enjoy, and yeah, hope to catch you next time. Thank you very much. MPC Live 2 can live sidechain. Sure. Yep. There's a bunch of things that can live sidechain, but I haven't found anything that can live sidechain that fits into the workflow that I like to use. One thing I am considering, and I don't know exactly how it will work. Well, it really kind of depends. What's really missing in the world of live hardware performance right now is performance mixers. Nobody has come up with a good one that's not a 40-pound DJ mixer that's as big as this entire setup. Like, you can use a Pioneer V10, or you can use an Allen and Heath, like the Zone 92, Zone 96. Great mixers, but not designed to be portable and carry on and all that stuff. So somebody needs to come up with a good performance mixer. Until then, I'm going to keep using the Octatrack. And what I would love to have in a performance mixer is something where I could run in a kick track separately, and that I could then use to sidechain. Because like if I was using the Analog Rytm, this has separate outs for every track, so I could run the kick out to something to a sidechain compressor. Now, that said, it is possible to do that with a bunch of stuff in modular. And when I'm using my modular case and not the Syntakt, that's one of the advantages of that, is that there are a lot of units, like the Endorphins Ghost has a sidechain capability in it. There's a whole bunch of other units that have sidechain capability. So you can do that. And if all of your melodics are coming from that and you sidechain it to a kick that you have, you're going to get mostly all of the sidechain that you would want to do. You couldn't do it individually on the drums from the same machine, but whatever. You would get a lot of what you were looking for. But no, as of right now, I do not have this stuff. But yeah, an MPC can do it. But as I mentioned earlier on in this stream, there's a lot of reasons why I can't I couldn't bring myself to kind of love the MPC workflow for performing live, just because of all of the menu diving. Roland MX1 as the final mixer. It's pretty good at adding final. Yeah, it is. It's one of the few that's out there that can do that. But yeah, adding effects per track, and it's cool. It's great. It's the thing that's unique about the Octatrack, and the reason why I've kept with this so far until I find something better, is the ability to customize the effects. So this template that Matthew made, that EasyBot made, all of these effects are custom, and so if you want to make an effect that sounds a certain way, you can make it in here using combinations of the other effects, because the way this works is you're basically trig locking to a scene all these different parameters. So you can say, okay, when it's number 7 assigned to B, then it's going to do all of these things. The filter's going to move this amount, the resonance will change, the delay will open up, the reverb will get longer, the filter will high pass, the band pass on another. You can do all of that stuff and build a unique effect. So this has 4 parts, and each part has 16 effects. So you've got tons of different options to use for performance effects, and those are just the ones that he's made. You can modify and make any ones you want, so it's very, very customizable. But yes, side changes where the TR8S is nice. It is, but it's not, wasn't worth it for me enough as a trade-off. I don't need the sidechain as much as I need the ability to tweak sounds live, and I couldn't do that in the TR8S in any kind of efficient way. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to use the sidechain because of that. But yeah, it's there's no ideal, and everything this comes down to is really how do you use stuff and what do you want to make? What's the sound you're going for? What kind of music are you producing or performing? And that's going to determine what your setup is. And there's no one perfect setup. This is my favorite one at the moment, but that might change next week or tomorrow or whatever. I love to experiment and try out different things and figure out what things I really like the most, and then I'll take those things that I like the most, and those are the ones that I'll take with me when I go to perform. Cool. Well, I think we're going to call it there for the day. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. I appreciate that. Feel free to share this around, pass it around so other people can see the live stream. And this will be up on the channel afterwards so that it'll live there in case you ever want to go back and see it in the live section of the channel. And thank you guys very much. And hope to see you in the next video. If you've got other questions or other things you'd like me to cover in different live streams or in other videos on the channel, please put those in the comments. And I'm happy to do whatever I can. I'll help with whatever I know how to do. So thanks very much, and hope you all have a great rest of your weekend. Talk to you